Kia ora and welcome to the programme. You're watching GREG, the Government Regulatory Practice Initiative, based here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. This is webinar episode 6 of 7. 7 webinars that, taken together with 5 films, form the 2021 GREG annual conference. My name's Ian Kaplan, and before we go any further than this, I'd like to welcome one of our guest speakers today, Mohi Apou, who's the Chief Advisor Māori at WorkSafe, to open these proceedings properly with a karakia. Mohi, kia ora.
Kia ora, Ian. Tama tū, tama oho, tama i te au tai tangata. Tu ramatia tu iki tia kaupapa ka takato te marae ātia tū matauinga i tōna tamira i tui o nei. I te pau pakitara ware o tāne o ka piripiri e tui o nei. A tū toro ki te rangi e waka mātau mai, waka mātau ake. I te unga mauri uri wai ana i ona karanga, kia eke ki te taumate e o te tangata. Tū tautika, tauaro ki tai au, piki tū, piki ora, piki maramatanga. Ki manawa kai au, ki manawa kai awatea. Manawa we tuki o ngā mokopuna pā arakiki. Āpiti atu ki taunga e takoto māwiwi ana i papa kāinga, i papa wale tūroro. Ko tā mea mai, ema mai nui, ema mai roa. Me tiki atu te wai o rongo ki oroi atu, ki mākere atu ngā weri o te kinu. Kia tū tinana wātia mai ai te ngākau. Te tinana te wairua i te ara takatū, i te ara takatū, i te ara takatū. Ko iara e rongo whakatairangi tia. Tūturu whakamaua maira e koe ki matanuku. Tūturu whakamaua maira e koe ki matarangi. Tūturu whakamaua maira e koe kia tīna. Hui e tai ki. Morena tātou.
Mohi, thank you very much. And this is episode 2 of our Krau Māori Relationships mini-series within a series. And joining Mohi is Claudia Faletolu from Wakakatahi NZTA and Marutawhao Delamere, also from Wakakatahi NZTA, respectively Māori Cultural Advisor and also from the Cultural Engagement Team. Welcome, welcome colleagues. And we're going to go now through Mohi and then to Claudia and then to Maru, each to offer us a mihi pepia to really set the scene as to their path and how it continues from the previous webinar to this webinar and to honour their path and engagement going forward in this webinar. So if I could hand back straight away to Mohi, so over to you.
Tēnei e tuake ana I runga I te ngākau whakaiti. Mai I te maunga taranaki, huri noa tai atu rā ki te rātu taha ki o Tongariro. Ma ngā marae o wainga, ana kuau tēnā. O tino, whakapau ka anai, ka eke te tōtō, me ki rā ki roto I a ngā rauri ki tahi. Ko ngā timaika, te Apou, ko pākaraka te marae, ko mō I Apou tēnei ame I atu ana. Tēnā tātou katoa, kia ora tātou. My name is Mohi. I live in between two maunga, Taranaki and Tongariro. And most of the iwi groups between those two maunga have an affiliation in some form or another. But my knowledge base, I claim back to Ngāti Maika within Ngā Rerekitahi and the pā that I reside from, that I resided in my time, which is Pākaraka Marae. My name Mohi, tēnā koutou, morena tātou.
Thank you, Mohi. Claudia.
Tēnā koutou katoa, nā mihi nui kia koutou, ko te ahu te tōku maunga, ko waitangi tōku awa, ko nā toki mata whaurua tōku waka, ko parawhenua tōku marae, ko nā te korohiu rātou, ko te uri taniwha, ko nā te haneira, ko nā te hine, oku hapu, ko Ngāpuhi tōku iwi, ko Claudia Faletolu tōku ingoa, e te kāna te kōrero, I o tātou tīpuna, e kore au I ngaro, he kākano e roia mai I rangi ātia. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa. Morena everybody, my name is Claudia and I hail from the far north. So all my whānau reside in O Highway and O Kaiho. Yeah, one of the most beautiful places in the Motu. A little bit biased, but
okay.
But very, very beautiful. And I grew up in Wellington for most of my life, and now reside in Brisbane. But I am currently in Wellington, visiting the children, but feel like I'm permanently stuck here for a little bit more. Kia ora.
Thank you. Maru.
Ai te piu e te makiu kua pōi mai kia mātou I tēnei rā e hihia nei te whakarongo ki ngā manu o te wānui a tāne tēnā koto katoa. Ka mihi ki a koe mohi nau I tuku te wāhi ki tō tātou matua e pai ai e manu ai te haere o tō mātou waka I tēnei rā, no reira tukana me mihi atu ki a koe. Wā tātou tuni mate rātou kua whetūrangi tia, haere atu rā tō tātou kingi e noho mai ana I runga I te ahurewa tapu o na mātua tipuna e te whare o te kāhui ari ki rire hau pai marire. Hoki mai ki a tātou katoa ngā konohi o rā tātou e whakakanohi ana I a rātou kua haere kitua o paerai anei rā te mihi atu. Ko Waiahau, ko Marutawhao Delamere taku ingoa. Ko ori ki te maunga, ko waipapa te awa, ko Ngāti Paiakau te hapu, ko te whānau a Apanui te iwi. Ko mātātua te waka, ko pau mātangatanga te tangata. I te taha o taku whaia, ko matawhaura te baunga, ko roto iti te moana, ko Ngāti Pikia o te iwi, ko Ngāti Hinekura te hapu, ko te arawa te waka. Ko tama te kapua te tangata. Kia ora everyone. I just want to mihi tu mohi for starting our hui off today. And to everyone who is here listening, and I really enjoyed my time last week, I think it was. I'm losing track of the days in old Tamaki in my COVID. So I really mihi to you, or mihi to you to Ian for facilitating us, telling us to hurry up, or you've had enough. So mihi kia koe and kia ora tātou.
Kia ora, Marutawhao.
Kia ora.
Thank you everyone. It's lovely to have you back on board. And just a quickie from me. I mean, Captain, this is as I say, GREG, the Government Regulatory Practice Initiative. We take the view that it's time to sit back at this time of year, given it's one of those years, and have conversations. That's what we've been having. That's what we're having right now. A couple of housekeeping points. First things first, this did start live as a 30-minute webinar, but absolutely by popular demand. And given that we were talking about flexibility and how people should listen and adapt for the Crown, we've done that. We've extended it to an hour because that's what we were asked to do, to capture the essence as much as we could within this time of the Crown Māori relationship and how we can apply it more. Of course, in 90 minutes in aggregate, there's only so much you can do, but it's a good start. Now, it is a chat, it is a family show. There are two ways that we can deal. One is the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, members of the audience, and that way you can put a comment down if you want to say something to our panelists or to me, or if you want to ask a question. But it's also conversations within conversations. I can't offer you a literal cup of tea, although I'm going to come to that in a minute, but you can instead say hello to people that perhaps you haven't seen, or network with them as you would in a normal traditional conference using the chat function. So I say again, the colleagues with us won't consider that that's rude if you want to use a chat signal to somebody. It's all part of the networking conversation. Now, for those of you, well, actually, I'm going to do a poll now, the Prologue Poll, as I call it. I'm going to ask you first of all, and Claire's going to put, thank you, Claire, the poll on the screen. How many of you were here for episode 1 of this series? And one of the stories that Mohi mentioned in episode 1 was actually a very profound, I think, motif, which is you can't just have a relationship on a Crown Māori basis overnight. You've got to have 1,000 cups of tea, metaphorically and actually. In a sense, literally, it's a developing thing. So we did invite in the circulars that went out to people to bring their cuppa, and here's mine. And I can't see whether you've all bought yours, but perhaps you can answer in the poll whether I see Mohi's got, and yep, Claudia's got something to drink. Maru's got something very good, and I say I've got something. I've also devoured half a Twix, but don't tell my wife. Did you join us for the first conversations in episode 1? Please answer there. And do you have a cuppa with you? So members of the audience, let's kick off with that poll. Who's bought a cuppa? I'm not actually seeing the answers, and I'm sure you're not shy. Green tea in hand. Okay, I'm getting assurances the other way. Let's move on then to the questions. And Mohi, I'm going to stay with the tea image, but not for too long. It's just really picking up on what we discussed in a previous episode. This is a long process, the Crown Māori relationship, and cultivating it properly. It's not just a single cup of tea, is it?
No. So, as you said, it's a metaphor. The intention there is about creating consistency of presence.
Yeah.
You want to get people to the table, have those chats, create that trust. And that's even before you get to the real reason why you're meeting. Our people, they are the one or two things, seasons, winter or summer. The summer, as we go in, you want to get them warmed up. So as opposed to going straight to the take or the actual purpose, the consistency of presence about creating that trust, for them to get to know you or whoever it is that's going to see them, and they get that bond there. And it's in a similar situation, you can liken that to the pepeha. We have pepeha for a reason, or when people get up to do their mihi, they want to know who they're going to be addressing, who they're working with, who they're talking to, what's their background, what do they represent, what are their worldviews, what are their values. Just in the pepeha, you can get that. Similar thing with a cup of tea. You gain that type of understanding through that sort of full process, and that's how our people would be thinking. Just as a quick response to your question.
Yeah. Thank you, Mohi, for that. And I think it also picks up on what Maru said last time is it's about turning up when it's actually not necessary in part of the relationship, the Crown Māori relationship. I don't know, Maru, if you want to just recap that point, because that moved me a bit last time. The idea that you don't just turn up for fixtures when it suits. It's about cultivating a relationship. It's a good relational point for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a lot of iwi, they want to look at an agency or Crown organisation as an organisation that they can depend on, and that they can guarantee that they're going to come through with the outcomes required. And so sometimes it's about showing up to tangihanga for local community leaders or iwi leaders. And, when you're having your cup of tea, making sure you bring a kai. I'm pretty sure everyone wants a biscuit with their cup of tea this morning, and showing them. And I think that those are all values that when we are sitting with our friends, our whānau, that we intrinsically know, we just have to, as government organisations, make sure that those transfer to our relationships with Māori. And I'm sure that once we do that, and I'll put my hand up for Waka Kotahi and say that we haven't done that yet. We might get the cup of tea wrong. They might want a coffee and 2 sugars without milk, but we're still working on it. But as long as we're bringing something to the party or to the kaupapa that we're meeting for.
Absolutely, thank you, Maru. I'll bring my Twix. Go for it, Mohi.
I'm just saying, just on that point, to Marutawhao's point, there's sometimes when you go into an occasion, you're not the host. Still, it's a good way of creating that trust. If you take something to in this case, to a marae, never go empty-handed. As my kuia used to say, don't go empty-handed, because then they think you want to. If you go there empty-handed, they think you want to fill it up with something from them. So it's just something to.
Thank you,
I
Mohi.
think,
and it's
with 1,000 cup of teas, that metaphor, I think, really speaks to decolonising the world, decolonising the way that we do things, and making it less transactional. And it's about, for us, everything is based around whakapapa. It's all based around our tikanga, and it's about extending our whānau. So when we say 1,000 cup of teas, it's about extending our family, building relationships that are much deeper than just the transactional, I need something from you and you need something from me. So just like, Marutawhao and Mohi have spoken to, it's about getting together, getting to know each other before you even start talking about what the taki is or what the kaupapa is. It's about you just spend some time, extend the family, extend the network, and decolonize the process, because it's not about, what can we do to make Te Ao Māori fit into this world. It's flipping it and saying, what can you do to fit into our world?
All right, and I think, Claudia, thank you for that. And I think it is the less transactional interactions, as I'm seeing in the chat. We've got 70% of the 225 strong audience here who've got and told us through the poll they've got a cuppa, so they've listened. We are going to go back, because I know this is what we discussed, to some of the questions, to honour some of the questions in the previous episode. We have got an extra time for now. Just members of the audience on an administrative point. I want to embarrass him slightly in a nice way, but Mohi is very kindly actually on leave today, but he's so dedicated to this subject and to this interaction that he's taken time off his leave, but he does have a pressing engagement at 1:45. So we will bid Mohi farewell at that point. So just a big thanks to you, Mohi, for being here in that context. Keep the questions coming in. I'm going to sort of split it with our colleagues from some of the last episode's questions and this episode's questions, and we'll see how we roll. Please do, members of the audience, vote for the questions. You know the thumbs up button by now. That way you can watch the questions go up and down, and we can vote them a bit, and I can see they're already moving. One for me, Mohi, it's about, I'm just going to linger one more time with a cup of tea. And it's a transactional point. A lot of the time people just have half an hour or less in a rapid context. I guess, how is it possible to import the notions that we've been discussing into that? It can be difficult, can't it?
The old people back home used to say, "Iti te kupu nui te kōrero." The idea, how can you actually get a point across in a small amount of words, but still hold the intent of the response to the question? So
yeah,
and that's what at one end of the scale. The other end is that, like last week, that's a good example, and this no fault of anybody, it's just the way it is. You can see that there was interest, there was energy there, and to want to answer appropriately to some of the questions. You don't feel, I'm talking about myself here, not my colleagues, but you don't feel like you're doing it justice to be able to answer it. Because as I'm sure I can say the same with the others. If we're trying to share 200 years inside 30 minutes, that's going to be pretty challenging. So if we can put it in that way.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Claudia Malik, did you want to add anything to that? I think that's a nice way of putting it.
I think it's a beautiful way of putting it, and I think it's ticker to be able to say that. There's a certain point you can go to, but after that, you just have to make the time. You just have to dedicate and be committed to the mahi that's ahead. Kia ora.
And I think we also, Ian, I think we also have to be realistic with timeframes of engaging with Māori. Often, and I can speak from Waka Kotahi point of view with our New Zealand Up program, that's moving at a rapid pace. So we're asking Māori to respond to, and we're putting them under a lot of pressure because we do have timeframes that we have to meet, and we are trying to get these through urgently. And so I think when we are looking at normal projects, if we start the engagement at the beginning of the project, it's easier to have those kind of conversations at 30 minutes if from the very beginning everybody's on the same page, everybody understands the scope, the process or the program that you're wanting to engage. And then if you do come to a place where it does get more rapid, that relationship that you've got in the beginning will assist that ability to encourage iwi to work under pressure.
No, kia ora. Thank you, Malu. I think that's a really big point that came out also in the previous episode in the time that we did have is don't go to Māori constituents when you've actually written a consultation. It's the drafting stage, isn't it, Mohi? The earliest possible stage.
Yes.
Okay. No, that's good. Let's just look at some of the questions from previously. So we had something last week and I'm just reading it from the transcript that we got. We got a lot of questions. One of our questions said last week on what's the main thing we can do to encourage more Māori to be comfortable becoming part of the Crown Public Service, which will hopefully increase empathy and kind of us and them divide. More recruitment in that context. Claudia, I think you said something about this last week as well. What are your thoughts?
I think for organisations and departments to move forward in this space, we need to see more of ourselves in the Crown. We need to have more Māori in the Crown. So how do we do that? And it's not just about recruitment. There's I feel like there's a lot of responsibility on sort of the more traditional HR teams or the people groups, because they cover all the people functions. So when we're talking about our people being present and seeing themselves in the Crown and being able to believe that they can participate in the Crown from the inside, it's about making sure that we have all the right structures in place, the right support in place, that we can recruit culturally, appropriately. So it's a whole raft of things. I think for us, we need to get recruitment right. We need to figure out, where are we recruiting? How are we recruiting? Are we writing it bilingually into Reo Māori? Are we using our networks properly? I think it's also about, what are we offering our Māori to support them, to develop them, what's in place for them? Because there's a lot of, movement right now around building Māori capability. That includes our Māori staff, our existing Māori public servants that are here doing the hard yards until we can get the next wave of amazing Māori that are going to come through the ranks and pick up this mahi from us. So it's about, what can we offer them? Are there things in place built for them? And what can we do in terms of the other areas? Are we making sure that there's enough presence and support around Māori staff when it comes to being culturally safe? Are we doing enough in that space in terms of, are we building processes that are culturally appropriate for Māori? And that's sort of inclusive of, diversity, inclusion strategies, leadership strategies, development strategies, learning strategies, all those types of workforce strategies, all those kind of key elements of a business and organisation. Is it built into it? Because then we have a better support mechanism in place to ensure that the Māori that do come in are in there right now, have everything they need to grow, to unleash their potential and to flourish.
Yeah. Aye. Mohi, did you want to add anything to that? Thank you, Claudia.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think we also, public sector and our organisations also have to understand the cost of personal relationships with Māori. I think I have never met an organisation that actually understands that in order to get a good relationship with Māori, yes, you've got a Māori in there, but that Māori has to bank on its personal relationships with iwi and Māori to ensure its success. So when they see you walking through the door, they don't see Wakakotai, for example, they see Maru and Claudia. And when things may hit the fan, they're going to come after Maru and Claudia. And I don't think enough of our organisations understand that. And going back to Claudia's cultural safety, and keep us safe to ensure that, when we say we're going to do something, that we're going to deliver for them. Because, and I believe that's why Māori work a lot more harder, I believe, than non-Māori in this space, because their name and their personal stake within that community or that iwi is on the line. Because when you don't deliver and you go back in there to different hui for birthdays, the kuia and kraua, they're going to tell you and they're going to make it known that they're either happy or they're unhappy with you. So I think I would like to see organisations treasure that a lot more.
Good. Understood. Mohi, what do you say?
Yeah, that was a good point. I like that. I've just come back to our Māori workforce down in the Crown sector. So you know, they go in there for the expertise. This is prior to the big shift now, looking for Māori for their particular expertise now. But even prior to that, when they used to come in, you came in as the person for the expertise at a policy or something like that. But you're also expected, oh, well, you're a Māori, you must have some sort of knowledge around te ao Māori, so can you do this for us? That was how it was. Maybe in some areas it's still the same.
Yeah.
So in a sense, if you look at it that way, they're actually doing more than the actual role.
Yeah.
So that, as well as another competency that they're being asked to do, which is them being themselves. So these are some things that I'd like to highlight about the agencies being very cognizant of that, unless they're coming in for that role around te ao Māori, they're actually asking them for something over and above the actual role.
And
that's a really important point, because I just think about like the mahi that I've done in my journey. For the last 15 years, I've been supporting kaupapa Māori in whatever job I've done.
Yep.
And that's not to say I'm an expert in any way. You know, for example, I'm not fluent in te reo Māori. I have enough to understand and to be a part of a conversation, but I'm not fluent, nor am I super expert at everything tikanga. But it was expected that when I was working in L&D and organisational development within HR, I was also that Dala Māori. I was also the one, can you just sing a song? Can you just hold the ceremony? Can you just organise this? Can you organise? And for the first 10 years, I was not paid for that mahi, but I did it because it was the right thing for Māori, for my people, when we were doing those interactions in the business. Because if it wasn't done, then it would be a short-lived relationship. And it's only been in the last sort of 5 years, I've actually been paid to do Māori mahi for Māori. And so, you know, to see that shift within the sector and the official shift in the Act only last year, you know, it goes to show there is growth, but there is still a long way to go in terms of recognising what Māori bring to the table for organisations and departments on behalf of Māori. And our relationships are critical. When you tap into a person, you tap into the entire whānau.
Yeah.
And it's just such a, it is such a taonga that you're tapping into. That's why we ask for so much, you know, cultural safety, because you know, organisations and departments expect a certain level of deliverables from us in our JDs, but it also puts us in really precarious and culturally unsafe situations. And that's why we need to band together. That's why we work best collectively. We always have. That's why we never rely on just our own word by ourselves. We always rely on the word of the whānau at the organisation that we work at, and then extend it out to the whole network of Māori across the sector. We connect to each other, and that's how mahi happens. It's because of those connections, not because, you know, Waka Kotahi requested me to do this, that, or the other. It's because, you know, I balance that alongside the needs of Māori and the whānau, and making sure that I can have both in hand so that there are better outcomes for everybody.
Relationships are everything. Thank you all for that. I mean, what I'm hearing very loud and clear, and the chat lines are absolutely buzzing with this on the side. Keep it going, members of the audience. They're saying things 100%, absolutely right. It's part of a case in GREG itself. Relationships are everything. But the C word that got mentioned a couple of times, I think, Maru, in the early part of the conversation, is cost. Now, we've got quite a few votes on one of the questions here, where it says, kia ora, there seems to be a tension between, and it's put here, is penny pinching in the public sector and showing manati kitanga. How have you navigated that tension each at your organisations? And as you're smiling mostly, Mohi, first you can start with that one.
No, it's not. I won't yet. So the word manaakitanga is a very, very, profound word that's getting loosely translated down here.
Yep.
For myself is how do you, so it's really about well-being. I'll put it, and my colleagues will come in when they're ready, but so for me, it's the well-being. How do you place a price on well-being? How do you lift somebody's we'll put this in, wairuatanga. So I'm hesitant about putting a cost to that, so I'll go around that. But at the same time, is it about the skill base we're looking for? You're trying to, to pay for. When we talk about koha, see, because I'm only just new here, about 3 years in the Crown sector. When we use koha in the policy that we have here, I changed that because of the way it was interpreted and why it was used in that time. But it was around, everything was about the dollar sign on the koha. Yep. And yeah, there is that. I do agree with that. Yep. I think I'm just trying to find for myself. I don't have a right or wrong. What I do have is about a caution when we use these words. They're very, very sacred to our people. Yep. And that however we use it in policy, that we use it correctly. What does that mean? I'm still working that through myself. Maybe Claudia might have an answer, or Marutawhao, but those are some things that I'd like to caution our people. When they use those words very loosely down here, that loses its mana.
Yeah.
Here in Wellington, and the way it's been, and that's not, and I think that's, it does. It loses its mana in the way we, I'll talk about where we are, and I'm not saying we've lost the mana where we are. We've actually got that right now.
Yeah.
We're getting that, so I think there's got to be a better way to handle that particular policy. It's just an example there. But anyway, Claudia, you got something you want to add to that? Because it's a big in the bonnet for me.
It's a big kaupapa, and it's always an area of tension, I think. And when you talk about money and the actual dollar signs, it's in every part of the organisation where kaupapa Māori is present, whether that's funding for a project that's going to invest in iwi relationships, whether that's the creation of FTE and the salary that has to be put onto Māori roles, whether that's the koha policy and the interpretation of our kaupapa and our tikanga into, the way an organisation operates. I think that's, that's a really dangerous line to be dancing with in terms of those interpretations. I would like to see more of that model being flipped. Like I've said before, you got to flip it. It's not about fitting our kaupapa and our tikanga into, a colonized perspective of things. It's the other way around. It's like, how can an organization or a department work with how we do things? We're not here to change the way we do things just for the public sector. It's about what can they do to flip it and work into our world, into Te Ao Māori. I think it's going to be a heated discussion for years to come, because we are hot potatoes right now. Having Māori roles, it's big, and everyone's advertising. So how do we, have that conversation in the organisation about how much we pay for, Māori roles? How do we quantify that? How do we justify how much we pay? And where's the consistency and the measure that we're paying them enough? Because, for the longest time, we never got paid nothing for the mahi that we contributed for those, types of kaupapa. Now we've got, proper roles, first time ever. And now we have to, figure out what does that look like in the future. In terms of koha, that's a hard one. I think, organisations and departments have done sort of their best at translating, but I challenge them to flip it back and understand what it means in that deep sense, because I know for me personally, if I have to go and do something for mahi and it requires koha, and mahi doesn't, my workplace, wherever it may be, may not put forward enough, I'll pay for it out of my own, because it's the right thing to do for my people when I go and represent in the mahi that I'm doing with them, because I need to look after them. That's our responsibility. And that's kind of my first job, is to service Māori first. I might be working at Wakakotahi, or where I've been before, Ministry of Health, Internal Affairs. I've always serviced Māori first, and then the public crown second, because that's my bloodline and that's my whakapapa. And that's always important to remember when you've got Māori working within your organisations.
Can I just jump in there? Thank you, Claudia. There's so much going on in the chat, and of course, this is absolutely terrific discussion. We need more time. Members of the audience, I'm just going to say to you, this doesn't end here. I think this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship, if I can put it that way. If you'd like to see more conversations of this kind, write into us here at GREG, write to me, and we can look to do these things. Well, I'm going to just move to a regulatory frame here. One of the questions from my colleague Rebecca is are there any particular things to take into account when working as a regulator regarding Māori Crown partnership? Because the interesting thing, given what we've all said, is that we're told to regulate without fear or favour. How does that hold? And given, Claudia, what you just said, how does all that hold? And I'll go to Maru on this just to start, but we can all share. How does all that hold in a partnership setting? How can you be partners when there's this, if you like, inner but proper conflict? How does all that work and reconcile?
Yeah, I think how you resolve issues that are raised in partnership demonstrates where your organisation is at the end of the day. And the measure is how iwi feels that relationship is. So if iwi can walk away from a disagreement or from an issue that is raised feeling good and still feeling like they're partners with your organisation, then you're doing good. In terms of a regulatory space, I've done the same challenge to our regulatory service in Waka Kotahi, and I've asked them where Māori sit in terms of the decision making, but also where does Māori sit in terms of holding us to account to ensure we're being good regulators, because actually the government or the Crown hold us to hold us and absolutely ridicule us when we're not doing our job. But where's Māori space to say that we're being good regulators for them? Because actually we got to remember that as a partner, they should have that ability to tell us whether or not we're regulating well or whether or not we're doing a poor job and we need to do better. I also think we also need to have a look at how we structure regulatory and how we inform iwi about those regulatory services and their particular function and how they function and where their space is within that service. So I think once we start doing that better, we'll get better rapport in terms of the many regulatory services the public sector offers, as well as seeing less, for example, if you're talking about safety and mahi, I think once we start adopting more of a Māori focus, I believe we'll have less workplace injuries, for example. We'll start, because as Māori intrinsically, we know that we've got to check in on people, that we might have a karakia in the beginning, so that actually our day runs smoothly, or that we run to the maramataka, for example. A lot of people are doing that when energy is high. Should we go out and to our construction sites when energy is low? Maybe we shouldn't be doing work on the construction site, but have a look at other things we can do to move that project further. So I think working more closely with Māori.
And in a partnership context, Mohi, what you're going to say to that?
Oh, I was just doing that because I'm cognizant of the time coming up close for me to tap out. But
yeah,
I just wanted there was one thing there. There's some points that Maru brought up and Claudia that I just wanted to answer to in case I don't get the opportunity, if that's all right. The point I was looking at is some of the phraseology. I use these words that I've been hearing. You hear the words like kaupapa Māori or mātauranga Māori. Tikanga, we do it the tikanga way or kaupapa Māori way. Down here, I'm talking about Wellington, never talk about an iwi, but certainly down here. So the question I often ask of those people or those ones who bring it up is, what is that? What does that mean? And yeah, I'm amazed that it's fine. I'm not, this is not a diss, by the way. I'm amazed by the different worldviews that everyone brings in when they talk about those words. And obviously it's in the spaces that they're looking at. We've got Waka Kotahi here, so it's obviously it's leans away from that way of thinking. And if it's in my case, WorkSafe, leans in that way of thinking. So, but for myself, is one thing I'd like to encourage us to think, and this is a challenge in a good way. When we say these things, what does it actually mean, and where is the beginning point for that? what is the beginning point? I don't have an answer. I'm just saying, where is the beginning point of that? Because when we talk about these types of value sets here in Wellington, we've got, I don't know how many different iwi groups working here in Wellington. It must be all of them in Wellington. So for my colleagues, for them not to be confused when they hear one interpretation from someone from Te Arawa talking about this is what it means to me for waka kotahi, and suddenly it's different from somebody else's worldview from, say, Ngāpuhi over in another agency. So I think they need to be aware of that. These are about worldviews, not about my belief is more valid than hers. It's really about their worldviews. It's really about how they were brought up, and they bring that with them. So you take a person, I'm sorry, Claudia, you were the first one in my view. Take a person out of Ngāpuhi, you can't take the Ngāpuhi out of that person.
Yeah.
Likewise with somebody from Te Arawa. You take them here, he comes down to Wellington, he's still Te Arawa no matter where he is, 100 miles away. So they come with that worldview, they come with that understanding, so they come with that type of resource when they feed into the system. This is something to be mindful of when we're interacting, when our agencies are interacting with our iwi groups, but they probably don't realize they got that resource amongst them too. I'm not saying to abuse them, but that's I'm just asking to be cognizant of that, to be aware of that. These are the types of things, the dynamics that are here in Wellington.
I think it's a really, really interesting point, Mohi, because if I may say so, at the start of this week, in a very completely different context, those of you here for, I can't remember which episode it was now, but with Professor Grant Peake, and he's written a book with a glossary of regulatory terms. And these are everyday terms which people bandy, and different regulators call them different things. And something more profound like Tereo, where there's a word, and obviously multi-layered potentially in its meaning, but if we can't agree what our meanings are, I guess the point that you're making, Mohi, also is where do we start if we're talking across purposes? Would that be fair?
Yeah. Oh yes. That's the question. That's the question I would encourage us to think about. Yeah. But I don't have an answer for Ngāpuhi. If they're working in waka kotahi, they don't have an answer for me. I do. But we have a similar. What we do have in common is this thing called kawa, which is we understand te ao Māori in the context that we were living in and were brought up in.
Understood.
And we all know this stuff. I'm sorry, Ian. I might have to...
Mohi, I know that. And before you leave us with our thanks, I'd like to acknowledge you and what you've done with our thanks. I'd also like to acknowledge those in the picture behind you. And I wonder if in your parting words, you might just impart to us who's in the picture.
I've got it, what they call kaumātuatanga, which is called selective amnesia. So... So I can't remember all of them, but what I can say, this occasion was in 2015 during the kingitanga, but at the Wānanga o Aotearoa at that time. The occasion was around the two gentlemen you see in the front there, kaumātua. They've passed on since then, but they had a conversation about what does this thing called karakia mean. Talking about karakia tawhito, ancient karakia. So that this is only one part of the group, by the way, and this was a series of 4 hui. This was the second hui. The first one was in Taranaki, but the idea was about reviving our karakia tawhito of pre-colonization.
Yeah. And
is that resource still around? So this hui was around that, and the gentleman on my right shoulder, or left shoulder, on my left shoulder, Uirangi Waikerepudu, as one of the drivers of that. He passed away last year during COVID. So he was the big driver of that. So that's what that photo was about, snapping that opportunity while people who were in the know, had that ability, were still around, and just sort of, e hokinga mahara. Yeah, that's what that photo was.
Thank you, Mohi, and thank you so much for sharing that with us and for sharing your time with us, Ka kite anō. And we hope to see you again. I'm sure this is, as I say, the beginning or continuation of a beautiful friendship. It's been a privilege to have you on board. Thank you.
Kia ora, Ian. Kai te tuahine, taku hoi Marutawhao kōrua tātou tahi, kua hari ko te ngā kukuna o pēnei la tātou I tēnei wā. Hei tōna wā, kia ora rā. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you
koe.
very much.
Tēnā koe.
Kia ora.
Ora.
And there, I think, is a good place just to pause with I call this the popcorn poll. It's an interim poll. Claire's just gonna pop it on the screen at the moment. How are you feeling? And let's just see. Happy through to frustrated. Could be with the planet, so I won't take it personally. But I'd like to think it's possibly about how things are in the proceedings so far. And I'd like to see as many of you, without skewing the result, of course, as happy as possible and as interested as possible in what our colleagues are saying, because I think this is absolutely rich content. While you're doing that, can we just sort of talk about some other aspects? And these are questions that are coming up because I can just see the chat lines absolutely whizzing, and also the Q&A, and we've also got last episode's questions. So I'm balancing all of that out. But I'll go, Claudia, if I may, with Esther's question, which has got a lot of support. And it's, what kind of training and support would you like to see in the government agencies to make sure that there can be the meaningful engagement, I guess, Claudia, that you, Maru and Mohi have talked about? What kind of specific training could begin to be done?
It depends on to which people we're talking to.
Yeah.
So if it's for Māori, Māori staff, Māori public servants, then we need to go to them and ask them, what do they need? What do they need to be able to do the mahi that's required of them? Because what we do is whatever's requested of us, we go straight out to Māori and we go straight back to our whānau, to our iwi hapu, and ask them, is this right? Is this kind of meeting your needs? Is this what we should be doing? So if it's to think about what training do we need to offer and support our Māori public servants with, then that's a big, massive kōrero that needs to be, had. And some of that is already, happening. And there's a lot of kōrero around, our cultural safety, what we need to have in place to be able to safely do the mahi that's required of us. If it's to talk about training of Māori cultural capability and competency across the public sector as a whole, then there's a massive movement that's been happening in the last year or so around whāinga amorangi with Te Arawhiti and all those plans that have been put in place with guidance of frameworks. And I can just see that uptake of, I can see a lot of Māori businesses kickstarting their, services in terms of cultural capability training. There's a number of them now coming up, and it's about, making sure that you have the right people, the right Māori within your organisation and department to support you in building those plans, to support you in building the right frameworks that will help all of your people within the organisation, and to do it in a way that's meaningful, get the right service providers in place to support you, and that you build the relationships with them in the right way so that you have a meaningful and long relationship with them. So there's two different sort of camps to talk about, and it's mainly, to do around how do we protect, how do we uplift and give what we need to our Māori public servants, and then what does the rest of the public sector need in terms of uplifting their Māori cultural capability.
And I was going to actually, thank you, Cora, I was going to come to that, and Claudia, you do jump in on this. It's another question that's come. How can those of us who don't have whakapapa connections to Te Ao Māori develop the personal connections to help, to help our mates at work, so the burden's not always on Māori to do the extra mahi? How can people who don't have those connections get involved? And I guess also linked to that, what would you say about perhaps the difference that could occur with the potential Crown view? That's a sort of a bit of a Trojan horse question too. Who'd like to have a go at that one?
I think first we need to stop contracting out and farming out a lot of our work in terms of building Māori capability. I would like government organisations or public sector to actually start entrenching this into each and everyone's job within public sector, from administrators to cleaners to the DCEs to CEs to general managers. And to the little people like me on the ground, you know, I would like the agencies to actually start having cultural awareness training, cultural capability training. And I think, yes, we're in a COVID world, but those things can't be taught online. Those things have to be felt, touched and heard in the room, and so that it can touch your ngākau. And I would like to see public sector work together on creating something that can work across public sector, not just one for waka kotahi, one for MSD, one for WorkSafe. Actually, if we work together, it means that no matter where you are, there is going to be some cultural training, some cultural capability building in any rohe or area that you're in, no matter which public service. And I think we also have to start looking at making Te Ao Māori not seem so daunting or not seem so hard or so scary. I understand that our people can be a little bit scary, not saying anywhere or any iwi in particular, but we need to take that perception away, because I think if iwi see you trying, if iwi can see you working hard on that cultural capability, that they will be more forgiving than they will wanting to tear you down. I think it's when when people are ignorant, thinking that they can just go in and do whatever, then Māori start thinking, actually, what's going on here? You know, and I would like to see that more across public sector.
I agree, and I think, you know, I think it's an all-encapsulating concept, right? It's not just about, you know, capability. It's about awareness. It's about knowledge. It's about what do you actually want to do in partnership with Māori. So it's defining, if there's not clarity, then go and talk to Māori. If you don't have clarity around what the role of Māori is within the mahi that is happening in your organisation, you need to get out there and you need to talk to Māori. You need to figure out what is it that you want to do together. Then what we'd all like to see is that it's built in and embedded as part of the foundation of the organisation in every aspect, from all your strategies, from your 30-year plan strategy to all your workforce strategies, to all your policies, to all your processes, and at the same time looking at the capability, knowledge and awareness levels that you need to embed into all your roles and to what level is required of them. I think on the other side of that, though, we also need to make sure that there are correct measures in place, that we have things and levers in place to ensure that there are accountabilities. We need to call out people. We need to check in and make sure that they're doing the right thing. There's no point in setting up something and say, yeah, all ELTs and CEs will have a capability plan built into PDFs, and then nobody checks. There's no accountability. They're not held to account for it. We need to make sure that we put those in place and we call them. I think there's a lot of mahi to be done around exactly what you were talking about, Maru, around the fear. There's a massive amount of fear, and we need to myth bust all of that and just break it down and understand where that fear comes from. Because once we understand where that fear comes from, then we can diminish it as much as we can and rebuild with strength and confidence. It's one thing to give things a go, you know, give the reo a go, or, you know, try and implement small things that you can do in meetings. It's one thing to give things a go. It's another thing to commit to long-term investment and capability building. So it's not about having some tick box thing in your PDF or your PDP that's going to say, yes, I will do this in the next 12 months. You've got to figure out, what are the benefits of doing this for me, for my mahi, for my community, for my family, because in our world, in our culture, it's not just a work thing. It's a everyday. I live this every day, in, out, all the time. There's no off switch to being Māori and the way that we do things. So, you know, when people say, oh, could you just, it's another could you just, because it's all the time.
I love the way you put that, Claudia. There's no off switch. And also what you're saying, Maru, about giving things a go, absolutely not winging it, but the culture, if I can put it this way, of forgiving. It's potentially in the grain of the working crowd to try and do things quickly and do things right and drown proof against making mistakes. But what I'm hearing, I think, is sometimes it's better to make a longer term effort. And if it doesn't quite work out, to be resilient and still potentially, whatever it means in practice, to still proceed. Can you help me unpack that in my mind, Maru?
Yeah, I think, and I always tell everyone that it's a journey, and sometimes it doesn't matter where you are in the journey, but as long as you start the journey. And for some organizations and some agencies, it can be a year to 5 years. And other agencies, it can be 10 years plus. I think that Māori appreciate when wheels turn slower if they can see effort being put in, and they can see that changes are starting to happen. I think they would prefer it to take 10 years, a progressive change, even to move from transactional relationships to transformative relationships for 10 years, rather than we try something at 2 years, it not be where we want to, we're just better than where we started, but we're still at transactional relationships. So I think that when we take our time to want to do it right and in partnership with Māori, they appreciate and love that.
And I think what people need to start having more kōrero around is the why. Yes. Why is this important for Māori? Why is this important for waka kotahi? Why is it important to invest time? If you ask the right questions, put in the effort and have long-term commitment and development in your relationship of journey, then the benefits far outweigh what your initial engagement requirements were. So I think it's about taking the big picture, looking at everything that is connected, because you know, for us, everything is interconnected, everything is interdependent. This thing doesn't work without this thing, without this thing, without this thing. So it's about understanding that picture and asking, why is this important? Why should we do this? And that'll be because people will be coming from different places, from their own journeys, and they need to unpack some of that. And I guarantee it'll be uncomfortable. And that's good though, because being uncomfortable means you're learning, right?
Yeah.
So we need to make sure that we're making people uncomfortable, we're pushing people and stretching them to grow and learn more, and to look at the different ways that they can extend their capability, extend their awareness, so that it can have a much better impact and benefit into the mahi they do.
Thank you, Claudia, and thank you, Maru. And I feel that I'm learning, but I don't feel uncomfortable, because on this webinar, I feel well looked after. A profound thanks from me. Kia ora. I'm very grateful. There will be plenty more opportunities, I'm sure, and I hope to have this kind of conversation. From my perspective, before I hand over to you, Maru and Claudia, to close us properly, if I may, just a couple of housekeeping calls. This is episode 6 of 7 of the webinars. We will be putting a box set out probably next week, closer to Christmas. So you will get the chance, if you've missed any or you want to watch a rerun, on the GREG website, to watch these again. The 5 companion films that we've made, I'm happy to say, have now been released. Please watch and please tell your friends. I'd like to see that hit count on YouTube go up and up. Not just for egotistic reasons, in fact, not for egotistic reasons. I'd just like to know that they're being watched, because I think that there's been a lot of people who've contributed to them right across the sector. There are learnings right across the sector for everything that we're talking about here. Until next time, last episode tomorrow, same time, same channel. From me, stay safe, stay well, and ka kite anō. And I hand over collectively to Maru and Claudia to close us properly. Thank you.
Have anything to say, Claudia, before I do our karakia?
Yeah, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank Ian. What you've done here is an amazing thing to create a safe space for us all to share and to have this conversation. I want to thank everybody who's tuned in and leaving amazing comments, leaving really good questions, and hopefully you walk away with a few more questions of your own that you want to take back. And I think the wero, or the challenge that I want to leave people, is to figure out what are your next steps in your journey in the mahi that you do today. What are you going to take away today that you can do? But otherwise, ngā mihi kia koutou, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great rest of the afternoon. Marutawhao, over to you.
Yeah, and I just want to tautoko Claudia. Thank you all for joining in. Thank you to Ian for facilitating me. Huge mihi to Mohi and to Claude. You know, I always love having these kōrero, and honestly, feel free to get in contact with Claudia and I. We love having these kōrero, and I'm sure she's available, especially in Wellington, but feel free to contact us. Me inoi tātou. E te atua hanga he ngā kau mā whakahautia he wairua tika ki roto i a mātou. Ka wara mātou e panga atu I tau warawaro, ka wāno hoki tau wairua tapu e tangohi atu I a mātou. Whakahoki a mai ki a mātou te hari o tau whakaoranga. A tau tokana ake mātou ki tau wairua kakama. Kia pua ki ai mātou, o mātou māngai ki te whakamoimiti me te whakakroria I tau ingoa tapu, kroria ki tō ingoa tapu. Āmene.
Āmene.
Kia ora.
Kia ora whānau.
Thank you.